I want to find out how feasible is it to check a vehicle from overspeeding?
Well, we have the speed radar guns that determine the speed of any moving vehicle on the road from a distance of about 300 meters away from where the person is positioned. And so as the vehicle is approaching, the radar system will target the vehicle that is coming, be they two on a 2-lane or 3-lane, and it will determine the accurate speed of each of the vehicles approaching where the person holding the speed radar gun is. And so it will be recorded. And when we get to know that in urban centers you are supposed to drive at a minimum of 50 kilometers, a maximum of 50 kilometers per hour. You don't go beyond 50 kilometers per hour. And on the highways, you are having a maximum speed of 80 kilometers per hour. If you go above these speed limits that are in the law, you offend the law and you will be apprehended. It is only on the motorway that the speed limit has been raised up to 100 kilometers per hour.
But we want to find out, you see, quite recently there have been a number of roads that has been really done well. I mean, they have been upgraded.
Yes.
And now we see more vehicles having accident. I mean, drivers getting themselves involved in accidents rather than taking their time and driving. What do you think accounts for this increase in accidents on our roads? I mean, the smooth roads, the ones that have been repaired rather.
Interesting enough, people acquire the driving skills, say at age 18, and if the person is not careful, he doesn't understand the rationale behind the need for you to actually test yourself after every 2 years, and therefore the person becomes static in this old way of doing things. But if you look at the technology that is invested in designing new cars, if you look at the engineering that is inherent in road designs, you could see a beautiful road between Malam Junction and say Kaswa. It is a street, a 3-lane with a side lane, and therefore it is broad and you can see far ahead of you. Now, because of the lack of improvement and because of lack of personal discipline, the temptation for somebody who has been coming on a 2-lane is to try to let the vehicle actually go and test the speed, not considering that there are more vehicles that might be on the road. There are more people who you will not be able to think quickly to try to adopt defensive strategies to actually avoid crashing into them. And you see a beautiful place like that between Malam Junction and Tetegu, a lot of them crashing, and it will not be just one car accident, but to have 2-3 cars crashing on such a place. It's very unfortunate.
We've observed that most vehicles or drivers drive on the wrong lanes, especially on the motorway and other highways. You see, a car in the inner lane, and they don't want to even move, whilst cars that can move faster want to bypass and they are still on the inner lane. What do you have to say to these drivers?
Actually, it is one of the things that I think we need to educate drivers on. The heavy cargo carrying vehicles, 5 tons, 7 tons vehicles that are carrying tipper trucks that carry sand, tankers that are carrying water, petrol tankers that are carrying either petroleum products. These vehicles, when they are loaded, cannot move very fast, and they are supposed to be driving on the outer lane so that the drivers who want to overtake their vehicles will pass on the offside of the driver, where he can observe those behind him from his driving mirror. But unfortunately, the culture that has been developed in this country is that when a person overtakes another vehicle and is supposed to go off the inner lane, he stays in the inner lane. And these heavy trucks also maintain their speed in the inner lane, and so they force those who want to overtake to rather overtake on the near side, on the right side of the vehicle, which is very, very uncomfortable because you cannot observe what the driver is doing coming from behind. And so my advice, and the law requires that immediately that you overtake somebody, move into the outer lane and let the inner lane become the overtaking lane so that the driver can observe those who are coming from behind. It is an offense for you to maintain a slow speed, moving steadily in the inner lane and forcing other vehicles, smaller cars, to overtake you on the right. It is an offense under the road traffic law.
What about people who use mobile phones on the highways and even during driving around town? Is it right? Is it appropriate?
It is not. The countries where these vehicles were manufactured and imported here, the nations who manufactured the mobile phones and brought them in, they have seen the effect and the consequence of driving and speaking on phone. So they've tried to improve the situation for people who could not avoid the temptation by providing hands-free gadgets that can link with your phone. Even when you have earpieces and you get a certain alarming piece of information whilst you are driving, several psychological or emotional things make you lose concentration, and you may crash into a car ahead of you because your focus will be diverted and you will not even realize that the person ahead of you has hit the brakes and the lights are glaringly showing red that you should stop. But because you are speaking on a cell phone, you run into somebody, you crash into some pedestrian who is crossing ahead of you. And it is interesting to observe that when we are driving personalities or in an emergency and we are sounding a siren, you realize that people, particularly lady drivers, when they are on the cell phone, they actually become impervious to the siren, and they ended up standing right in the middle of the road and expecting you to meander around, which is not consistent with the law. The law is that when you hear a siren, you move right to the edge of the road and you stay put until the siren sounding vehicle bypasses you. They don't do that. I also observe that a lot of people are not wearing the seat belt, and the law that we have in this country has prescribed penalties for non-wearing of seat belt, but the regulation that will make it mandatory for all classes of seats in a vehicle to be fitted with seat belts was not passed. It is now being worked on, and by the first quarter of next year, this law about the use of mobile phones while driving, this law about the use of seat belts when you are in a vehicle, either on the front seat or the rear seat, is going to be made a law that is punishable under our judicial systems. And that is what the police is waiting, and they might even be attacked with on-the-spot fines.